Once again, it's really a pleasure to see you here at the Norwegian Embassy. It's not the permanent embassy, but it's a place which we are renting, while our very, very nice and big residence is up at the 34th Street. And when we have this same celebration in 2016, then we will be up there. I'm very glad that we have this possibility and this occasion to discuss Afghanistan, but with particular emphasis on Afghan women. And I must also say that I'm particularly pleased that some of my Afghan friends from when I served in Afghanistan from 2008 to 2010, that they are here today. And I would particularly like to, I have so many papers. We really like to welcome Shinkai Karokel, and we were together for the first time. I think I arrived in Afghanistan in June 2008, and just some few weeks after that, we met and we started to work together on how Norway be support for the cause of Afghan women. So it's really a pleasure to see you here today, and I wish you all the best. Really, that's from my heart. Then I would also like to say that, or repeat perhaps, that Norway, we are very much committed, and we will continue to be committed to the cause of Afghan women. And that has also, I would say, the reason why we are doing this is, of course, because it's, but it has also to do with our own in Norway. And I often hear here in Washington, and also other places in Washington, and now in the US, and I was in Texas just 10 days ago, and everybody, they are referring to the huge revenues from the Norwegian oil and gas sector. But if I tell you, and then that's also a message I have to my American counterpart, and that is that the integration of women, Norwegian women, into the labor market has had a more significant impact than the whole oil and gas sector in Norway for the last 30 or 40 years. And I can also give you another figure, and that is that the oil and gas revenues for Norway, since we started to exploit oil and gas in the beginning or the late 1960s, that has amounted to $15 billion US. So we are talking about money, and we are talking about an inclusiveness for Norwegian women into the labor market, which is obviously an important, extremely important, perhaps I would say the most important factor in the Norwegian social welfare model. Then I think it's also it's important also to tell you that last year we celebrated the 100th anniversary of what do you call that? General voting election. What do you call that? Women's right to vote. Yeah, women's right to vote. That was last year, and that was, we celebrated that last year, the 100 years anniversary. Also, where is Louise? There is Louise. We have been working also together for a long time back, and Louise, she is now an admiral in the Norwegian Navy, in the Norwegian Defense Forces. The reason why I'm telling you that is that in 1984 we opened up for women, for girls to have a professional career in the Norwegian Defense Forces, and that is another, I would say, an aspect of how we want to promote not just women and girls into the Norwegian Defense Forces, but it's an important part in the gender policy of Norway. Okay, that being said, we will have a panel discussion. I won't say much more. I will just pose some questions when we start. But before we start, I would very much like to turn over to our violinist. And she's not from Afghanistan, but she is from another very important country, and with a country which is suffering today, and that is Ukraine. We are all very much engaged in the international community in solving that crisis. And I'm very, very pleased that you could come here today. And please.
Welcome to Norway, as we say, right? Because it's a Norwegian territory now, right? My name is Solomia, and I'm a professional violinist, and I want to congratulate all women with the International Women's Day, and just add more. I wish you much health and wealth and prosperity to do what's your goals in life, and to do what you think you need to do for your countries, for your families, and for every person. And I want to play for you a very special song for Norwegian people, and this is, like, I would say, as a symbol of classical music, symbol of Norwegian. It's a Solveig song from Pergun.
Thank you very much. 1 minute, and then we organize the panel, and then we start. Should start, and let me start by introducing our panelists, and I will be very brief on that. And then we will have this panel discussion until 1:30. So the way we have organized it is that I will be posing some questions to the panelists. I think I will pose one question to each of them, and then I will open up for comments and questions from the audience. Sorry? And to my left is Carla Capel. She is the Chief Strategy Officer at the USAID, and she has been working with gender issues for many years, and I'm very pleased that you are here with us today. Then I'm also very pleased that we have an Afghan woman in the panel, and that is Palwasha Kakar. And she came to Washington last January. This January, just some weeks ago, and she is, in addition to being an Afghan, also a researcher on gender issues related to Afghanistan, but also more broadly. Then David Rank, he is from the State Department. He has been working with the Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan for a long time. He also served at the US Embassy in Kabul from 2011 till 2012. To the far left of me, it's Sanam Anderlini, and she is an international, well-known person working for gender issues too, but she was also very vital and crucial in drafting the Security Council Resolution 1325, among many other things. So with that introduction, I think that I would start out and posing a question to our Afghan participant in the panel, if you are happy with that. And that, I think I would go straight to a very important issue as I see it in Afghanistan, and that has to do with the political process in your country. And particularly what has been sort of at least many says, is a common wisdom that there has, in order for Afghanistan to be stabilized, there is a need to reach a political settlement between the insurgents, represented particularly mainly by Taliban and the Afghan government. And then we also have the upcoming election, the presidential election and provincial elections in April. But my question to you, and my question to you would be, how do you think, how would it be possible to maintain or to preserve and strengthen the situation for Afghan women if and when there is a political settlement between the Afghan government and Taliban?
Thank you. It's quite a pleasure to be here among such great people, and also I'm quite intimidated by all of my wonderful Afghan colleagues here who are leaders in their field and who've actually taught more to me, and I feel that their voices, I hope I represent them appropriately, and I'm really grateful that they're here. For the situation in Afghanistan, first of all, I think we have to question what kind of a political settlement it would be. Whether for Afghan women it is imperative that the political settlement is along the lines of accepting the Constitution as it is. So that's very important, and that there isn't any kind of bargaining to separate certain states out or to give the Taliban any more leeway in that sense. So that's one aspect of it. So if we assume that, okay, the Taliban somehow, this amorphous thing of what we call the Taliban, accepts the Constitution, and that there is some sort of political settlement, what's next. And I think that the next aspect of this really rests with the people in terms of what women want at the rural level and how their voices can actually be integrated at the national level, at the local level, integrated into the process of what that reintegration means. So we're looking at different aspects of the question. First of all, what is the political settlement? What would that actually be? And second of all, what would happen after the political settlement if there is something? So what would we assume that would be? Another thing to think about here is that in Afghanistan, women at the rural level, in terms of what they've been able to achieve, is very different than women in the provincial capitals or in the bigger cities. Women have been able to achieve quite a lot of success in terms of participation in government, in terms of access to healthcare and education in the bigger cities, in terms of actually running their own businesses, as we heard earlier as well. So we have these amazing leaps of progress that have happened in the urban areas. The rural areas, women still have, need a chance to catch up. And so the question is, what would the political settlement look like so that the rural areas allowed that space, women in the rural areas are allowed that space, rather than it being limited more because of a more conservative perspective and because of people thinking at the rural level that things should be cut off or stopped and encroaching on at the urban level. Another point to add to that is currently we're seeing security issues being a major concern among women. And the security issues, not just in urban areas, security issues not just in specific hotspot focal points, but across the board we're seeing security as a problem. And for women it's a problem because it's encroaching upon their mobility. It's encroaching upon their ability to access healthcare, access education, have access to the workplace. And so in terms of accessing their rights, security has a problem, has become an impediment to that. So the question then goes back to what exactly would that political settlement look like? Would it allow for greater freedoms, more security so that women could have access? Or would it still be something that's just related to the situation at the urban area and not really dealing with the situation at the rural area?
Thank you very much. And just to follow up on that, and then I would challenge Sanam Anderlini on that question. And it has to do with what was referred to as the differences between the capital, Kabul, and the provinces. And I personally think that with the international commitment to Afghanistan and the engagement, it's very important to reach out to the provinces, and in particularly both in the north, south, east, and to the west. And we know that the security situation, particularly in the south and the east, is difficult. And what sort of scenario do you think do you foresee for the post-2014, and what should the international community be? What should be the attention of the international community if we look beyond 2014?
First of all, thank you very much also for inviting us to this amazing house and feeding us wonderful brunch. I also hope that we hear from our Afghan colleagues more than us. But I think that in a sense we have to. So I think there are two things again, just based on what Pawash was saying also, that on the one hand the demand for increased presence in the political space, rights, wanting to vote, wanting to have education, jobs, etc. That's all over the country. I think an organization called Equality for Peace and Development, which all of you all know, did some consultations, and it's very clear that there isn't this sort of division between elite in Kabul and then the rural. The demands are pretty much across the board. But the issues around security and actually being able to move around, and whether all the resources that have been supposedly allocated for Afghanistan over the last 10, 12 years, did they actually reach the places that need the money and need, do people feel and see the difference? I was in Kabul in September, and it was interesting because, people would say, I'd say, well, how come the road isn't built? And they'd say, well, this was American contractors, for example. And I'd say, well, how come that road is built? And they'd say, well, that's the Russian road from the 1980s, And so this contrast of understanding that money has gone in, but has it actually gone in, or is it just being recycled back out to contractors here, or corruption, or whatever? So I think this is one issue. And certainly I think that what would make a difference is if we begin to see the questions of the schools and the clinics and the roads and the housing and so forth really make, actually in all of these areas improving. And the challenge, of course, is that the money is going to be significantly reduced. Whether we admit it or not, I think we can look to what happened with Iraq and look at Afghanistan and then look at Syria or look at other crises that are coming up. And there's going to be a shift of funding. But that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Because I think that in a sense, there is a readiness of local communities owning also their own processes. And I had two conversations which really struck me. One was with a woman MP who was saying that it's been, because of corruption in Kabul, it's very hard for her to get resources to her own communities. But she was saying, we have people who've given land in the local village and they want to build a school and so forth. So that there's a sort of willingness on the part of the locals, but it's not being matched back by the capital or the bureaucracy. Same in an area called Qala Ahmad just outside of Kabul. They were saying, I asked girls, do they like sports? And they said, we want to play volleyball, we want to play basketball. And it was just really, really wonderful. But they need high walls around the space because of, again, security and cultural things. And the locals had given the land and they'd done all the paperwork and so forth, but the government wasn't coming forward with the funds. So to me, the question is this a moment to think really more creatively around how we direct resources, the limited resources that are going to be there in a more targeted way? And maybe, earlier we were talking, maybe it's things like having websites and databases where you say, here's what these guys are offering. They've put this, it's like matching funds almost. This village or this community has come forward, they've given their land, they're giving their labor, they need $10,000 or they need, and somehow, of course, keeping an eye on whether there's corruption and so forth. But the importance being that people need to feel the difference on the ground. I think that's key. The other thing which we don't often talk about, and it's fundamental, is young men need jobs. Whoever the Talib are, often it's to do with the fact that it's young men who are unemployed or underemployed or being left out. And if we don't have serious programs around proper employment and dignified employment, the burden is, we can't always put the burden on women, whether it's in Afghanistan or anywhere else, because the problem, they're not creating the problem is coming from somewhere else. And so we need to tackle the question of why is it that so many young men are being easily recruited into these types of movements. What's the challenge? Because they're also being manipulated. So I think that's another side of the story that really needs to be tackled if we're thinking gender in a comprehensive way.
Thank you very much, Sanam. And I think I would like to turn over to you, Carla, because it has to do, and you Sanam also referred to it, is that I think that it's obvious that the international community's volume of assistance to Afghanistan will be reduced, but we don't know yet what will be the amount of that. But why is it important for the international community to continue to be engaged in Afghanistan? I mean, with all these challenges we have in Syria, Middle East, other countries in Africa, Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, all over the planet. And now we have been in Afghanistan for 13 years. We have invested a lot, but why should we continue? So that's my first question. My other question, and that is also something which Sanam referred to, and that is education. And we are so proud, the international community, we are so proud about the quantity of schools having been built. Norway had built many of them in the northwestern part of Afghanistan. We are proud that we have built 100 schools, but that's the number, the quantity, but we are not talking about the quality. And I also think that the international community basically has invested in basic education in Afghanistan. But how to bring Afghan girls into the university, the high school and universities, and to give them those possibilities. So and then over to you.
Those are the small questions you heard. Well, thank you for organizing the conversation. And I want to join my colleagues on the podium in being intimidated and saying anything about Afghanistan to this audience of people who know Afghanistan far better than I could ever know Afghanistan. But and it's wonderful to see some of you who I haven't seen in a long time. So, first of all, the first question as to why to be engaged in Afghanistan from a personal perspective and from an institutional perspective is easy, because we're involved in all the other places you also talked about. And our commitment is to using U.S. taxpayer dollars to advance security and prosperity around the world. And so we feel an abiding commitment in USAID to staying the course and to remaining engaged in these countries. If you look in Afghanistan, the volume of resources, attention, intellectual energy that have been put into trying to assist and collaborate with Afghanistan's people is, over the last decade and a half, has been huge. And we feel not only a moral commitment, but an organizational commitment to try to secure that progress. You alluded to the gains in education, and I mean the international community and USAID are particularly proud of the gains for girls' education and girls' enrollment, for increases in life expectancy, which have been very substantial over very brief periods of time, which is as much a credit to the incredible Afghan people as it is to any external donor assistance that came into the country. Now the key is, how do you consolidate and secure those gains and ensure that you don't have slippage back. That said, I think your point is a good one. What is the quality of that education and what comes after people are educated? We realized, not just in Afghanistan, but around the world, that part of the problem was when you looked at the Millennium Development Goals, for example, in education, you saw girls and boys, the gap was closing in terms of levels of educational attainment, grades completed. But then when you did the analysis, a lot of those kids still couldn't read, whether they were boys or girls. And so our education policy today is focused on increasing enrollment, but it's also focused on increasing the quality of education and making sure that that girls and boys are receiving a quality education. So I agree. I think that it matters. It matters that girls and boys are enrolled. It matters that they complete school, but it really matters that at the end they come out literate and numerate and they can function within society. For Afghanistan, obviously, the issues related to girls moving from primary to secondary and tertiary education are particular, and I know there have been recent analyses, for example, that within the schools is a particular constraint as you go up in grade levels, and making sure that girls feel safe and that their families perceive they'll be safe in schools is going to be absolutely essential. That's one of my most fond memories when I visited Kabul, was going to visit a program that AID had just started when I got there, that was an internship program for girls coming out of Kabul University, and was placing them in ministry jobs. And the goal was twofold. I mean, the first goal was to get girls employment that was professional employment, that was not serving tea within ministries, that was enabling them to use their degrees. And it was placing these girls. But the more important goal, I think, was getting the workplace ready to accept women in professional roles and playing those roles successfully when they emerge from school, because you have this very large number of young women now that have been educated post-Taliban, are finishing university. It doesn't get to the rural-urban divide, but they exist, and they're really essential to driving progress, I think, for women and girls, but also for the economic well-being of Afghanistan in general. And they found enormous success, and we've now scaled up that internship program to be over 100 interns, and we continue to scale it up. But there's an extraordinarily high placement rate for those girls. Over 75% of those girls get permanent employment. And so you really are now seeing women in the workforce in ways that are different. And it shouldn't be 100, it should be 1,000 or 100,000 or 1 million, but it's a start. And I think those are the kinds of efforts that are really essential to moving us towards a space where the gains for women and girls cannot backslide so easily.
Thank you very much. I'm turning to you, David. I have this perception, and I think it's also a political message from your government that for the United States to continue to be engaged on the civilian sector in Afghanistan and to promote social and economic development, it is in a way a sort of a prerequisite or a condition that you sign the bilateral security agreement with the Afghan government. Why is that agreement so important for your government to continue to be engaged in Afghanistan?
Sure. Thank you, by the way, and again, all the really sincere thanks for inviting me, and congratulations again to the intimidating group of women, particularly Afghan women out there. If I can comment a little bit on Carla's first before I get to your question, and you know, when you were discussing the admiral and how Norway has changed, perceptions have changed of gender in society. I mean, I work for an organization that just a few years before I joined, and that's not that long ago, if a woman got married, she had to resign as a foreign service officer, as a diplomat. And we would not allow married women to work as diplomats, and so it's worth thinking about, and the change didn't come because the government decided one day we're going to make things better for women in society. It came because that's, I mean, just the demands of Americans, and not just American women, American men as well, that the way we had always lived had to change, and I think that's something that's the encouraging message, and this is not a discouraging message, but that can only really be done by the people in that country, by Americans or Norwegians or by Afghans, and I think it's a process that time can only is the only way to affect that sort of process. I mean, I take our experiences as encouraging, and I also think that we're nowhere. I mean, it's not a goal that you cross and then are done and kind of wipe your hands together and say let's move on. But then, Mr. Ambassador, to get to your question, you know, why do we need the BSA to continue civilian assistance? The easy answer to that is no. I mean, we don't. We would continue, and I think I don't want to, Carla. This is really your. You know, I don't want to speak for USAID, but I think USAID would say, you know, we're prepared to continue assistance to Afghanistan, no matter what the status of the BSA, no matter whether we have, you know, 100,000 troops in Afghanistan or 1 or 0. I mean, that USAID, as the sort of part of the U.S. government that administers international assistance, is prepared to find ways to deliver assistance where it's needed. But at the same time, you're right, Mr. Ambassador, when you say that the message is out there that, look, without a BSA, it will have consequences in what we're able to do. And I think that'll come in two areas. One is just as a practical matter of the ability to get out, to deliver assistance, to monitor it, and to be confident that it's going to the ends it's intended. I think that's a significant one, and I mean, this is not a sort of formal administration position, but just a recognition, and I think you alluded to it, that the presence of American troops brings attention, brings the kind of attention that enables the support for the sorts of really extraordinary assistance we've had in Afghanistan over the last decade. And that's not a sort of a formal linkage, but it's just a recognition, and I suspect it's the same case in Europe and other places and other members of the international community that are involved in Afghanistan.
Thank you, David. Okay, then I would like to open up the floor for you to pose questions to the panelists, or to make a comment on whatever you want to do, but I hope it is related to Afghanistan. And sir, please. And please introduce yourself also.
I'm Don Collins, and I have the joy of being in your home and in many events that surround your embassy, and you've been doing a wonderful job here in Washington for so many years. But endemic to the conditions in the Middle East, it seems to me that as long as we have this strong undercurrent of monotheistic, male-dominated religions, we're going to find ourselves continually shoveling sand against the tide until we get some kind of relief from women who are coming up rapidly. And after all, today we announced in the Wall Street Journal and on the Washington Post that the Pope himself is going to try and enlarge role for women within his institution. I wonder how that's playing out where you are.
Parvasha, would you like to comment on that? Or?
Sure. In Afghanistan, it's a very interesting dynamic, because on the one hand, we do have religion being very male-centered, male-dominated, very patriarchal. But on the other hand, we're having this awakening that's happening of the recognition of women's rights within religion and women's roles within religion. This is something we were just talking about in terms of seeing the presidential candidates and what they've been talking about in terms of women's rights within Islam. The other thing that's interesting to see is how many female religious leaders there are in Afghanistan, and how that number is growing in terms of women-led madrasas that are popping up, in not only in rural areas but also in urban areas, and seeing women reclaiming that space and taking over that space in terms of saying, okay, it's dangerous for us as a Muslim woman to not understand the Quran and not know our rights and how to talk about our rights within that framework, and really owning that and start to reclaim that space. And so that's something that's starting, and we're starting to see that trend in Afghanistan. But it's very far from saying that, in Afghanistan, anytime soon there'll be prayers led by women. I mean, I don't see that happening very soon. But I do see that, there is this awakening happening, there is this recognition happening. Both male religious scholars, sort of opening up and awakening to this understanding of women's rights within religion, and also women reclaiming that space more and more.
Thank you. Sanam, please.
I think religion has always been male-dominated, or at least the monotheistic ones. So I think, but the issue is that in our region, and the region is very broad and very culturally diverse, but what we've seen in the last 30 years is that a particular brand of Islam is being promoted very aggressively, which is very regressive towards women. And we saw it in Afghanistan, we're seeing it in Pakistan, we're now seeing it across Libya, Syria, down to Eastern Africa, and somebody is doing this deliberately. So that I think is the issue that we have to recognize, that there is a force or forces behind promoting a very regressive version of Islam, which is very intolerant. The political ideology basically doesn't want women in the public space, but it's also intolerant of minorities. And that's hugely dangerous, because you begin to pull apart societies that have been living together in a syncretic way for years, and you end up with what we're seeing in Pakistan right now, which is this kind of constant levels of violence against different sects. And
it constantly keeps dividing between the Shiites and the Sunnis, or whatever.
Whatever, Shia, Sunni, Hindu, Sikh. It doesn't. Christians, one day. And this has to be tackled. This has to be named. I think it's really important to call it what it is, and see what the sources are and what the funding sources are and so forth. But it's also important to understand why is it sort of spreading so easily in those various societies. And that's where I think the social economic dimensions come. That if you have very poor people and very young poor, especially young poor men, and they don't have dignity, they're being excluded from the benefits of whatever society is offering, and somebody comes and gives them a different vision, it's easy to go in that direction. So we have to think, what's the vision that what's the other side? What's the other side of the equation? And I think that's been a vacuum for many, many years from a social and economic perspective, and it's reaching a very dangerous space right now, I think. So it's a complicated, very sensitive political.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to be the next one?
Are women free to advocate? Is there relative freedom for women to advocate for change?
Where?
In Afghanistan.
I think we have some very great examples here that could answer this question. Right? We've got amazing advocates inside of Afghanistan. Of course, they do meet a lot of challenges in the advocacy work that they do, but they have been an amazing force in Afghanistan that has really, brought about the kind of change that is very hard to find in the region. Because of their tireless work, because they've been working across all kinds of divisions, it's just been amazing to see their work. But of course, they meet lots of challenges. And perhaps Shinkaijan, you can talk to this, or Poloshijan or Rengina can speak to this more.
What women are doing in Afghanistan is advocacy.
Yeah.
But whether women can speak within this religion spaces or that is a little bit challenging, and women have been challenged from time to time. It is like a very hijacked place by very conservative men, and it's very easy for them to announce like this person is convicted of blasphemy or some, and we have been witnessing women have been put to trial a number of times just by speaking like some of these madrasas. Or I'm not very optimistic by women-led madrasas, because sometimes women entering those spaces become themselves the abusers the same way as men are. But equipping with Islamic knowledge is very much important, which we are promoting among activists. And there are a couple of interventions with some religious scholars, feminist scholars in the region, also some of other Islamic countries through women and living under Muslim law and others, to support women to have that Islamic knowledge too, because women has been, Islam has been used as a weapon against women, and we want to give women that power to protect themselves. Whether it is within the politics, in parliament, from time to time the issue is coming about women mobility, an issue of mahram, which means a woman cannot go or travel somewhere or even share the same office space with a man who is not defined under religious specification, which is for mahram. And we know all of these are used just to limit women, because women have been vocal on different fronts against warlords, abduction, rape, and so many other things. And because several identity has been so much mixed, and at the end it is the men who are wearing that they use one or other to suppress women in Afghanistan. But I would not say like women are not maneuvering. They are starting to find their spaces there by learning more and to advocate for that change. 2 years back, it was the first time that women activists went into the same mosque in the presidential palace with the highest council of religious authorities in Afghanistan, which is called Shura Ulama. And Shinkai and a few other women made it possible for a lot of other activists to go into the same mosque. It was not easy for those men to go in the same place, but I think women had a message there, that religion is not something which belongs to one gender or other, but something which can be used, or let's say given the same protection level to both gender. We had back and forth backlashes and issues. Later on, in few months, we had a statement issued by Ulama Council, which was trying to tell women that your place is secondary in the society. But there are also reasons why women didn't went to that kind of debate with them, because what women are trying strategically in Afghanistan to narrow down those distances with the religious authority in the country, and those negative perception about women's rights coming only from a Western perspective and all that to be understood well. And but it doesn't mean in this journey we will not be facing problems. We will be put in trials. We will be having different issues, and we'll be receiving different threats as we are, but I think that's the way we are fighting, and we will continue.
Please.
Actually, just want to add to what Palwasha said that my experience is from Kandahar, which is south, and it's very conservative and very religious community in Afghanistan, and it was the de facto capital of the Taliban at the time that they were in power. For us, as much as we like to not use religion, we're forced to, because that is the only way that we can get our foot in the door to even start the communication with the community, with the society, because otherwise we are branded as Western, feminist, influenced, women who are trying to bring modernization to a very conservative society. So for us, it's a strategy. But at the same time, your question about advocacy, I think we women have become almost natural advocates, specifically in the South, because women are still under the burqa, so we're still covered. Our identities are not so much known publicly. Whenever people want to talk about an issue that is sensitive to the society, the men often come to the women and push their women to the forefront to speak, because you as a covered woman speaking, you can say the message, but you don't necessarily have to be identified by one group or the other. Because if you speak pro-government, you have the Taliban coming and killing you, and if you speak pro-Taliban, the government will come and kill you. So I think men have learned to use the space that women have, and I think we women then have to be smart about utilizing that space that has been created for us. And I've seen women maneuver their ideologies about including the social change, the justice within the injustices that they're living on a daily basis. So I think there's a lot of room, even within the restrictions that exist in the most conservative place like Kandahar, that if done right, I think we women can do a lot. We still have a long way to go, but I think we've made a lot of accomplishments in the past 10 years.
Thank you. I think it also will be interesting to challenge some of the other also Afghan participants here, and that is, what are your sort of prospects? What are your wishes for the next president to live in the presidential palace for some years, and what's it will probably be a man, and will there be do you see any difference between this one and the next one, and in promoting gender issues?
I think coming election is very much important, and I hope those who have the majority of the votes really win the election, and I hope we have a free, fair election. That's the most important. And women were also able to cast their vote to those candidates who are really pro women's rights, not just believe on tokenism. It's up to the candidate who is going to win, by fraud or by actual votes. And because we have experience with some of them that when there was as a minister, they really didn't support women's role in their own ministries. Lots of pressure came. Sometimes we women went to the palace. We pressurized the president. Then the president were forced to take some action. But maybe some of them, we know that they're really pro women's rights. So up to the new candidate, new president. But still, I think women advocacy group or women activists, they will still keep to advocate with the new government. They will try to force the new government to bring more women, because one of the TV debate was had many times the candidate, this women's rights issue or women's role in the future government this issue was brought up, and everybody apparently support that. But I know, but sometimes we also which we couldn't do anything. They might bring the woman, which is really forbidden and doesn't have women's agenda, to push it. They will only support men's agenda. I think it will be, again, lots of work for women activists to be aware and to introduce really strong women to really work for women's issues. So it's not very much easy with new government. I think all men try to take their rights based on the ethnic or political parties or religion. This is always like they are distributing the positions. But what about women? Unfortunately, we are not that much united, and we don't have that much force to say, yes, this part belongs to us. But still, we will work on it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Lincoln?
Thank you very much. I just have a question.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Lincoln Behrman. I work at the Norwegian Embassy. Thank you to everyone participating. I had a question concerning how we as an international community can really understand how we can be the best supporters for the women in Afghanistan. And it was talked about earlier that maybe, it can so easily backfire if we push too much, right? Because it becomes an outside force pushing on Afghan women what we think is right, and it just becomes a problem for our cooperating partners that we are so strong about an issue. So we were talking about the possibly, you have to elevate the voices of women in Iran, in Pakistan, the areas around, maybe as a much better intake on how we can support the Afghan women in the future. So I just was wondering, how can we build a good understanding of how we can be good partners in the future that is wide and it's open and we understand how you want to communicate about it?
Thank you. Pavasha, would you like to do that?
Yeah, I'd like to start, and also with the support of my Afghan colleagues. I think, first of all, the international support has been crucial and has been really important to women being able to make these gains. But also recognizing that there have been amazing Afghan leaders who have taken this upon themselves, such as what we have in this room here. And I think in the situation, especially right now, where these issues are very sensitive and we want to prevent a backlash, the first thing is to talk to Afghan women about where they want the support, whether they need the support, and where they want the international community to hold off and say, no, these are not the issues that we want you to push on. Yes, okay, we recognize you're supporting us behind the scenes, but let's not be public about some issues. For example, on the issue of the eval law, there was a lot of this discussion about when it was time to push and when it's not time to push. But I think the key here is to really engage with the Afghan women leaders and really support them in where they see the importance is to have the international community come in or not, or support when it's important to support from a different side, to start supporting other international colleagues on some of the issues. I think that's very key, is to listen to them. And Afghanistan, from right now I'm looking at things from a little bit of a global perspective. I've started to look at things globally, and I have to say that women in Afghanistan have really taken leadership, have really done some amazing things that other countries haven't been able to do. And we have amazing leaders there, and really to allow those women to lead is very important. To stop thinking about women in Afghanistan just as victims, but as leaders, and how the international community can support that and build on what really they need, what we need, and understand that.
Sanam, there were some references to Iran and Pakistan. Would you comment on that, please?
I mean, I agree. I think, what we're seeing, we work regionally, my organization works regionally as well, and we're actually promoting and supporting regional exchanges, because we think that it's really important for whether it's Afghan women or Iranians or Libyans or Syrians or whoever, to be able to situate and point to the demand for rights as indigenous to the region, to the culture, to the context, and using whatever framework. If it's Islam that helps, let's use the Islamic framework. And by the way, Islam can be incredibly progressive, so I think that's really important. But to be able to point and say it's happening, Iranian women learned from Moroccan women, for example. So that the exchange of experiences and being able to work with each other is very important, and to elevate those voices. I mean, there's one of the things is that when you end up with, say, Pakistan and Iran competing in Afghanistan, it separates the people as well. So if we can provide spaces where they come together and all of a sudden we have them speaking together, it's breaking down those types of barriers. But I think there's a different dimension to this as well, which is that in the interactions that as in the international community, as governments, you have government to government. What's the vocabulary we're using? Because if we're saying, women's rights are important, and it's being understood in certain ways, it's actually can be doing damage. I remember speaking with Somalis, and when I said women's rights, they said, oh, you just want all our women to be divorced and become promiscuous. I was thinking, I really don't think that's what women so to me, it may be the last thing on their minds. But it's really, whereas if you say, you know, what do you want for your daughter? Do you think your daughter should be educated? Do you want your daughter to? I think it just shifts it and takes away the labels. All the labeling has become very, very kind of just, it's radioactive, and there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. So I think we should kind of go dig deeper and challenge them. To me, the idea that we constantly put the burden on women to fight for their own, as opposed to challenging the men and situating it within their own family contexts, really. You know, is this what you want for if your daughter was, I think it begins to shift the conversation, and it makes it much more human, and actually also touches on their own core interests and core concerns. If they're community leaders, they care about the widows in their communities. I mean, this is a fact, right? So let's talk about it from the standpoint of what their interests are, as opposed to what we think our interests are, and then the terminology, which can then get lost in translation a million times as well.
If I can just follow on to your point, there was one of the every year the Asia Foundation does a survey of the Afghan people, and it's a really fascinating piece of research. And one of the things that really jumped out at me got exactly to that. When you ask Afghans, or when they asked Afghans, is the country going in the right direction, in the wrong direction? It's something like 60% of Afghans think it's going in the right direction, which, as an American, where that number is about 20%, it's a remarkable figure just there. But then if you ask, why do you think it's going in the right direction, it's not surprising. The first two answers are frankly not surprising if you know much. One is that security is better than it was a decade ago under the Taliban. The second is economic opportunities are better. They're not great, but they are better, and people think they're getting better. But tied for third is, if you ask ordinary Afghans, and this is a very comprehensive survey, it's because education for our daughters is better. I mean, that was in third place on the list. I think it was really encouraging. It's not something that is a Western push, this is just ordinary Afghans saying it. And it's couched in the right language, not women's rights, but my daughter's school.
Carla, please.
I think another important role for the international community, whether it's Afghanistan or elsewhere, is to continue to shine a spotlight on these issues, because it's incredible to think that we are over a decade from sort of post-Taliban, and there's a degree of attention still focused on the rights and roles of women and girls in Afghanistan. If you look at the arc of narratives in a lot of fragile places around the world, it declines and disappears very, very quickly, and that's a real credit to the women leaders in this room and the policymakers who have continued to keep this on the agenda. There are many places in the world that don't benefit from that, and notwithstanding very terrible situations for women and girls. And so maintaining that focus is very, very important, I think, to the flow of resources, to the flow of attention, to the pressure felt to maintain gains. It's one critical ingredient.
Thank you. We have time for two more questions, and one is Gro, and then over there. Gro, please.
Yeah, Gro Holm from the Norwegian Broadcasting, it's the Norwegian Public TV. I just wanted to say first, I've done some reporting in Afghanistan earlier, and I've also had some very positive experiences, like when this new Shia law on family came out. I wanted to do a test. I went out to the street and did an enquete asking women, have you ever denied your husband sex? And I didn't think I would really get anything out of that, but I did. Lots of women answered, and they started to answer very frankly, and particularly those behind the burqas. And the men engaged themselves also in the discussion. It was really funny. Then I met Rangina there. We didn't talk about sex. We talked about security and possibilities for women, but very positive experience. My question is related to mobility, social mobility, because with all those people, women now being educated, what will happen when they meet, like the decision by the Ulama Council, you shouldn't travel without your relatives? I asked one of the mullahs about how far can a woman travel without, and he thought 3 days of walking. How much is that? 67 kilometers, he said. 67 kilometers you can travel without a company. I don't think that is official. I think that was his imagination. But with that kind of attitudes in the top ulama and the religious council, sort of sanctioned by the president because he was also there and took part in the prayer in the mosque, as far as I know. And with also the skepticism to women working together with males. What's happening to all those women with education to a certain level that cannot find work? As many men I've met, they're saying, it's so good my wife is getting education because she can then better educate our sons at home. What do you do with all those women and their expectations?
Thank you, Gro. 2 more questions, and then I will. Then the panel will answer your question. It's one over there, and then Louisa there.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for holding this, because I think as the end of
Can you please introduce yourself?
Sorry, the end of 2014 draws near. It has been a great concern for me about what will happen to the lack of security, and will these gains for women continue, and what kind of protections will be in place. And so my question is, do the Afghan women in this room have any confidence that whomever gets elected will make a priority of using the security forces to protect women and their rights of mobility and their rights to an education and the rights to become doctors and lawyers and that sort of thing? And I was wondering what your feedback is about whether you think that will continue if there is a complete drawdown of Western forces at the end of this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Last one is the Admiral. Yeah. Louisa, please.
Thank you very much. It's actually linked to your question. I have a question on the operations that has been going on for the last 13 years, and quite a few women have actually been engaged in Afghanistan, and we have had female engagement teams, and we have had gender advisors from the Western countries. And my question is simply, is for the Afghan women, have these teams had any effect? And have you met any gender advisors, and have they made any difference?
Thank you, Louisa. And so then we have three questions. One is on social mobility. One is about the international security forces and the Afghan security forces beyond 2014 in protecting the interests of Afghan women. And the third one is on gender advisors. So who would like to take the challenge to answer at least one of them? Pavasha, what about social mobility?
Yeah. I think that, there's 2 parts to this question. One is, whether women have the education that are allowed to work, and it's not just about women being at home and educators in the home. Referring back to the Asia Foundation survey, which I was a part of, and thank you.
I didn't know that before I said nice things.
Thank you. Writing the Women in Society chapter for the past 3 years, we've seen a very interesting decline in Afghans supporting women's right to work. And that's been very interesting in looking at that in light of security issues. So we're seeing that maybe this issue of women's right to work, or men supporting women's right to work, has to do also with this issue of security. Going back to the issue of the mahram, of course in Afghanistan it's a very limited understanding of what the issue of the mahram means, but oftentimes it's linked to security. That a woman, it's for her security's sake, it's for, it's with her best interest at heart that she travel with a man, so it's connected to this whole understanding of security. So I think looking at that, but then going back to this question of, well, so if they are educated, then what? Where are the opportunities for women to then work? And I think that gets back to the question of, do we have institutions that can absorb women? Is there a priority? And we're seeing, we've been trying to put it through this priority of women being hired by the government, by local governments. There's been a big push to pilot this. For example, in Mazar, 30% women being hired by the municipal government. So there's those kinds of pushes that are happening in Afghanistan that are very interesting to be watching and looking at. And then women in education, we need more women teachers, we need more women doctors. There's a need out there. The question is, can we actually funnel the right kind of training to these women and allow for that space to happen so that women can then go out to their jobs and communities feel comfortable and secure in allowing women to do that. So I think there's so many different aspects to that. social change in understanding about what it means for women to be working. There's also the aspect of the training. And then, of course, it gets down to people's perceptions of security and whether security is improving on the ground or not.
Thank you. Could we take the second question now? That has to do with the Afghan security forces, the drawdown, and do you want to do that?
I think I can at least start.
David,
I mean, first of all, the drawdown. There's the big news of recent days on our president talking about the need to begin planning for the possibility that there would be no bilateral security agreement, which would mean we would not be able to keep troops in Afghanistan, and which by extension, because NATO is looking at the U.S. As the pillar of that mission, there would be no NATO mission. I think what was missed in all of that conversation was, I mean, that was the fact that our military is going to plan for essentially all contingencies is something we've been saying for a long time. That really, to me, wasn't the news. The news was essentially the president saying he's willing to wait until President Karzai's replacement to look at concluding a security agreement. In other words, opening up a little more flexibility on time, although there is still significant pressure, and it will influence the later we go, the amount we can commit just because of practical realities. But what you're and in any event, that would allow us, and even without a permanent presence there or a continued presence there, it would allow us to support. We would continue to support the Afghan National Security Forces and the whole structure of the relationship since 2001, which is essentially a bargain that we will support the system that was established in the Bonn agreements, and Afghanistan will continue to strive to become the sort of partner that the United States and Norway and members of NATO can be partners with, and provide the sorts of support that we have. And that gets down to questions of, if you have a military that is no longer willing to and a government which sits over that military that doesn't stand for the same sorts of basic ideals, including basic democratic ideals, it would not be, we just, as a practical matter, it's not a threat, but just a practical and political matter, could not continue the partnership we have.
There was a specific question on gender advisors, and the one posing that question, really, she pointed directly to the Afghan women present here, and she asked whether is there any knowledge about that gender advisor position.
Regarding the female engagement team with military. Well, I think the presence was good, at least for the image of those countries, and at least they could share it. But honestly, because even like the province or the district I am representing, the parliament, this engagement team never came to meet the women or share some of the values or protect or work with their interest. So maybe they were just like in their own military compound, and they were not properly engaged with women. But at least even they were not able to distribute some of the aid, which is really help women in the community level or in the village level, because all the time aid or support or money or the project came or just shared with the men, and that's what the man demands, and just they implement that. Even like at one time, one of the European country, I encouraged them that I will bring women, and please like invite some women, and said no, you cannot do it because it's very conservative society with this. Lots of things. Then I brought a woman with a burqa. I didn't wear the burqa. I was just with a normal cloth, and the other women were properly covered. I brought women and put them there to sit there and listen. And while they were talking about their programs and distributing some radio for the community. And first I give it to the women. So this female engagement team was not very much strong enough to really to do something for women or to get engaged with the community level. But definitely with different big institutions, as a gender advisor, I think they have some sort of impact. At least they brought up these issues, they had a concern, they had an objection or like a correction in the policies, whatever that was. To a certain level, it was I think was good, positive. I just want to have a little comments regarding the mahram issue, because we are a Muslim country, but we are not that much conservative, because I, as a woman working as a head of the NGOs, working, spending nights and days with the different villages, but my entire dealing mostly with the men was. And also as a parliamentarian, my entire voter were, most of the voter were men. Nobody asked me, where is your mahram? Why are you traveling? Because I was surrounded by men, my bodyguards were men, my driver was men. This issue is not very much hot, but definitely this issue exists among some of these politicians, some of the extremist group. They want to brought up this issue, how to have a control over women. And maybe this is one of the strategic issue was forced by our neighboring, or maybe by intelligence of the region, to brought up this issue and control at least half of the population, which are women. This issue is